Hi, everybody. Once again, I'm Bob Boland, the former athletic integrity officer at Penn State University, now professor of sports law at Seton Hall Law School, and also partner and co-chair of the sports group at Shoemaker Loop and Kendrick Law Firm. I have multiple jobs, so you can't fire me from all of them at once generally. That is a big topic, but as you know, I get to play in culture and sports as stage and talk to the most interesting people in sports. I'll introduce them and then get around to the guy who makes all this possible. But what we're about to have is a conversation that grew out of a prior conversation, a conversation about the crisis in sports betting and how that was affecting our leagues and our teams. And we were lucky enough to have a commissioner on there. Doug Logan was the founding commissioner of the MLS. Later was the executive director and head of USA Track and Field. So he had two of the most important jobs across sport. We did that last conversation with our good friend Jeff Chatterton, who's a crisis communications expert. Given the way of the world, Jeff is off today dealing with a crisis in New Orleans for a client. We're here today, and Andy Dolich, who has been the president of three Big Four professional sports teams, the Oakland A's, the San Francisco 49ers and the Memphis Grizzlies, and is one of the most experienced and most beloved sports executives out there, is joining us. A good friend of Doug's, a good friend of mine, and we're lucky to have Andy with us and his incredible experience, and Jeremy Piasecki, who is the founder of Culture and Sports, its chair, and its driving force and vision, a place to make sports better because culture is the functional part of sports. Uh, I get to be the leader for this little bit. We hope to welcome you with questions. Please put them in the queue if you can. Um, we're going to have just a really robust conversation around a topic that Doug suggested sort of should have been our next hour to begin with. And we find every time we get together and talk, there's always a next hour and a next hour and a next hour. But I can't say more about my friends Doug Logan and Andy Dolich and Jeremy. You're going to add because this is really specially in your area, in your space. But the idea that I think is extraordinary here is that we're beset by crisis. Crisis seems to walk behind us right now in the world, but particularly in sports, whether it's sports betting, whether it's challenges in other areas, whether it's even the controversy that around good things like the Olympic gold medal in hockey that goes with it. We seem to have controversy, crisis communication flowing out of that. And so, one of our challenges is, as we see this and we work in this space, is how do we prevent them? And Doug, you came up with some ideas on prevention. So, why don't I let you kind of kick us off and talk a little bit about how do you prevent a crisis before it begins?
Thanks, Bob. You brought up an interesting contemporary topic in this in the controversy that has arisen from something which never should have happened. The post game, post championship locker room celebration on Sunday. Gary Bettman lost control of his asset. His asset was up for grabs. Um, a lot of the controversy is going to live for, I would guess, years. The incredible performances by both the women and the men is going to be overshadowed by a crisis that was preventable. And by that, I am just going to cherry pick some of the things. I mean, I watched the Olympics from a television seat in Saratoga Springs, New York. Middle of the week, end of the week, I kind of saw Cash Patel hovering around the competition. I saw Cash Patel had reportedly flown there on a governmental plane. Someone should have used those images and that knowledge to say something awfully bad can happen out of this. Something and should have sat down and done what good business people do, which is SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And at least looked at what bad thing could come out of this. My good friend Dolish, I used to tease him when he's a inveterate fisherman, and he used to fish in the Mississippi River when he was running the team in Memphis. And he used to say, no, nothing good comes out of dark water. Nothing good comes out of murky water. Well, there was murky water towards the end of that great championship run. The guy should have been banned from the dressing room. Someone should have seen that political opportunists were going to take advantage of the situation, and they lost control of the narrative, they lost control of the message, and it could have been prevented by um, by people who get paid an awful lot of money to think of the oh shit moments rather than oh we're winning USA USA. So I throw that out there as a beginning challenge that that these institutions, which I'm grateful to have been involved with in the past, and that some very capable people are running. You can sit down, you can think through what the consequences are going to be, not only in a long range view, but a short term view. And I will tell you that what occurred on Sunday was totally preventable.
And sort of illuming the idea today that, and even in a great moment, a moment of victory, something can be hijacked in a way and taken in a narrative that you didn't really want functionally. Andy,
But
you're
that's not new, Bob. Shakespeare's the good that men do are often turred with their bones, that the evil lives after. I mean, read a little Julius Caesar, and that's been happening forever.
Wow,
and
we have so many quotes that we can throw in here, and we'll be Shakespearean and Aristotelian or whatever. But as I was listening to Doug, I was thinking about a line that's been around for a long time. Crisis is the new normal. And we'll get into that a bit later. But what hits me is that there are so few moments of pure joy in our society, all over the world, just pure joy. Now, it might not have been north of the border of the United States when the goal was scored, but it was pure joy. And those that have the responsibility of pursuing that and seeing the magic moment happen should, as Doug said, be smart enough to say, all you have to do is look at the guy's eyes and you know this is not going to go well. You look at the most positive moment of the State of the Union address was the introduction of the American team. But where was the women's team, right? So you have a controversy instead of a doubleheader of pure joy. And that is what I think is most important, because sports, we're prejudiced here, but sports provides as much joy as any undertaking on the face of the globe.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to bring up is this 100% was preventable. And it could have been something as simple as the locker room is off limits. There's going to be an opportunity for VIPs to meet the team as they walk out of the locker room, but before they, go on to meet with their families and everyone else. And if you really want to break it down, oh, well, the Olympics is huge. Kash Patel was the U.S. government's representative, and he should have had easy access to the team. Well, the U.S. OPC is a separate organization from the U.S. government. While there is funding that comes from the U.S. government, it is a very separate organization, and it has its own personnel, it has its own leadership. And yes, it is important to get a visit or a phone call from the president of your country, whatever country that you may be playing for, you may be competing for. But there's a time and a place. If you were to break it down to a simple level, And I've encountered this same issue at multiple levels of my own coaching. It could start out as like a recreational sport. When I was coaching, rec soccer, for example, for my kids, you'd have parents that would come over all the time and would try to literally engage you as a coach while you were coaching the players out on the field. And you just had to, tell them there's a time and place. You had to prep it beforehand and say in an email or in a conversation, when we're playing on the field or we're practicing on the field, it is a situation where it is the athletes and the coaches. It is not for third party people. And that goes through my time playing and coaching. Professionally in Europe, it was my time coaching the national aquatics programs in Afghanistan. Everyone and anyone wants to be involved and wants to make their presence known. And as a coach and as support personnel and as front office personnel, it was their job to make sure that their celebratory moment was not interrupted and it was not hijacked for political theater.
Jeremy, I'm going to just pivot off that, and I think you did it even a better job. So I realized how remiss I was in not giving the full introduction of your coaching career, and the ability that you've had to help crisis recovery. But Doug, I want to come back to you. There is an Olympic rule on point. You've led a major sport in the Olympic movement, and there is a rule, an IOC rule on point that dignitaries don't end up in the locker room. In fact, of the people who are probably angriest at Kash Patel right now, I got to think Vladimir Putin is first on that list because he would have loved to have been in a locker room at some point in his career and never could get there. He had to host the Olympics to get there. So to some degree, there's already rules on point. What went wrong in this situation that allowed this to be grabbed? Who didn't see it? And who should have been doing that analysis in this case?
I'm going to go back and talk about it generically first.
Good.
Um, Long range planning is usually the purview of boards of directors of organizations. They have 4 or 5 key responsibilities, and among them is long range planning. And usually, SWOT analysis, going back again to what I was talking about, assessing strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats to the organization are vested in them. And that's the textbook way. That's what gets taught in business schools and what have you. And that's all fine and good. Andy and I are practitioners, and we know that can really turn to crap, because usually what happens is the people that are doing your long range planning don't think you're weak and don't think there's any threats, because they're just guided by hubris and this entrepreneurial fervor that I've got the brightest shiny object, I've got the better mousetrap. So they do a really poor job of weakness assessment and threat assessment. So that once you become a hired gun like Andy and I were during the course of our careers, we got to take that long range plan and kind of set it to one side and say, okay, what's really our vulnerabilities? Who can threaten us? Where are our weaknesses? And you have to be ruthless about it. I venture to guess that institutionally, the game of hockey and the NHL and whoever the officials were from the standpoint of the Olympics were crazed about the possibility of success and the possibility of the first gold medal since Lake Placid, and just caught up in this joy and this fervor without thinking, hey, we could get a stink bomb thrown in this thing. And I clearly state that it's a responsibility. If you're going to wear the suit, if you're going to wear the fancy badges around your neck, if you're going to take the money for it, then it's your responsibility to think of what's going to go bad, what could go bad, be nimble on your feet and see a threat as it's occurring. I mean, I saw the threat happening here in the States on TV. And I'm wondering, where is this all going, and who's going to be the adult in charge? So I don't know ultimately where the responsibility lays, but in the institutional execution of this event that could have enhanced the brand for years. Instead, they're going to be playing defense for a long period of time to come.
This is such a rich topic. I want to at least come back and ask you a couple questions, Doug, and I want to come to you, Andy, and talk a little bit about crisis recovery in this moment. Doug, you gave us a format, and I think it's a pretty powerful one, that when you have the job that everybody wants to have, you have to be prepared to give it up and die on the hill occasionally to fight for it. You also have to be prepared to look for it. Clearly, it looks like this Olympic subject, which is a small one that's now going to be a big one, and going to divide USA hockey. It looks like to some degree that everybody was looking at the games as opposed to looking at the ball. They took their eye off the ball. You have some experience in the Olympic theater. It's a unique one, right? It's not one where anybody really is in control. First time IOC president, not really knowing what the ropes were and causing her own set of problems out there along the way. It looks like in Milan. Um, we USA Ice Hockey, an amateur federation, a national governing body, at least theoretically in charge, but not really because the NHL was really running this show. Bettman, who hasn't liked the NHL necessarily being in the Olympics, not necessarily loving this one. It seems like it was a perfect storm for someone to miss something.
Yeah, it was. It was, and you talk about the fact that the whole event from a power standpoint and from a control standpoint is in the gray area. A good executive, a good responsible steward of the sport and the brand would have said, okay, there's a vacuum here, let me step into it. Um, I'm going to use a word that sometimes doesn't get used enough, and that's courage. Someone had someone had to look Patel in the eye and say, not through that door, right? And instead of that happening, we had a, an assistant coach who all of a sudden got caught up in the celebrity culture and celebrity of the moment, saying, oh, this guy's going to be my best friend forever, and he's, today's version of J. Edgar Hoover. Of course you can come in and chug beers with us and bring your phone with you. There was a lot of stupidity, but where the point that I'm making is, from the top, someone should have realized that this could go sideways and taken the precautions ahead of time and had the courage to stand up and say, no, no, not in my sport, or no, not in my dressing room, and you don't do that here. And
I,
and and
I
and
did. I'm
there's
sorry, Doug.
too few people who are willing to, you know, take a magic moment and kind of squash it by putting themselves on a line that
I apologize for being Joe Scarborough and talking over my guests in this
way.
moment.
No
I
problem.
was wanted to get to Andy because I didn't. We've really gotten into a great run of topic here. Andy, I'd love to ask you kind of a two-part question, which a lawyer should never do. But the idea, Andy, tell us what a club president does, what a team president in a major league sport does, because I think it's one of the more poorly understood positions out there. You've been one three different times at three different leagues at the highest level. And then I'd like to put yourself in that room, the room where the controversy occurs, where the crisis occurs. What are you saying? What's your advice in that situation?
Yeah,
Answering
I
that.
just, and in terms of interrupting, I'm a Brooklyn-born serial interrupter, so there's no problem there. And I've known Doug for a long time, so no problem there. And Jeremy, you can do it whenever you want. I just think about one point before getting to your questions, and that is, if you brought all the constituencies together that are touched by this moment, in terms of Patel and all of that. And they met 6 months ago in a room, and you brought them together. And I believe that leadership is a hub and spokes to the wheel that goes in a right direction. And if you don't have all the spokes, you ain't going anyplace. And so many organizations don't even know what the spokes are. I'll get back to that. If you were sitting in that room with all those constituencies and said, ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest moments in sports, forget hockey, was Al Michaels, do you believe? And that was 46 years ago. And in a few months, the men's and women's team are going to win Olympic gold medals in hockey. Now, let's put our marketing, promotion, public relations hats on and drill down as much as we can to say that. And how are we going to elevate that? How are we going to immerse our audience in that? And I think that's a possibility that a instant like having a VIP that shouldn't be there or something else that would happen, you would talk about the upside of how you can market this moment instead of how you have to be defensive about it once the moment happens. So that's number one. And I think Doug would agree that that doesn't happen a lot, where people sit and say, let's talk about the greatness that can come in a year or months or next week. They just react to it. I also, as a team president, your number one job is to keep your job. Now, in a serious vein, what I think about, and Doug has had experience, and so many other men and women that are in these positions, you need to go every place in your organization. You should not be sitting in a well-paneled office and going to this place and that place and getting on the team plane and hanging out in the Hamptons. No, you should go to the furthest expanse of the parking lot and introduce yourself to the security guard who works out there and show him or her that you appreciate them. Talk to the concession workers, talk to your security staff, go to every single person in your organization, because they can detect crisis way before you. So I viewed my job, in a simple answer to you, Bob, as management by walking around and being seen and having anybody, the fans included, coming up to me and saying anything that they wanted. And that is being left out today because people are, again, looking at that VIP on their business card. I'm president, I'm COO.
Andy, I want to just even go a little deeper, because you gave such a good analogy on the front end of that, with the idea that you're the hub, and you reach out to the spokes, and your job is to get out to the far reaches of the wheel to see where those crises come. When I train people in stadiums, every bit of crisis management seems to come from, hey, can the lowest person report it? Can I get this upward quickly? And the failures come when the things are missed by the high level people. Going back to my background, Andy, I want to get in the idea, you're in this moment right now. You're in a moment where you have this crisis. You're in the leadership role. What are you telling the people around you in that moment? It doesn't have to be this one, but it's any moment of crisis when you're the leader. What are you telling the people around you?
Well, what I've told them and what solid leadership does way before that is not to play the fake, oh, we're all a team here, but to actually show it and mean it and use it, that we are a team here. You're not being paid $50 million a year to play, but you're just as important working in a concession stand or looking at tickets or helping some dispute that happens in the stands. So what I've tried to tell groups that I've worked with is that they might as well be the president of the organization and use that experience. You think about it, I'll use another analogy, like the iceberg. The 1/8 above the surface is what, the people on ships that sink see, right? But it's the 7/8 below the surface that really send the ship to the bottom. And so if you don't have people that have that kind of view, it doesn't work. And also to have the openness for them to talk to you. I just think of one moment. I think it was October 17th, 1989 at approximately 5:04 p.m. And we were playing the Giants. I was working for the Oakland A's. We were playing the Giants at Candlestick Park. And there happened to be a 6.9 earthquake that occurred
Kind
in.
of knew where you were headed.
Now, you want to talk about crisis? You couldn't meet on that one, I don't think, 5 or 6 months before. But what happened very quickly is that the league, the Giants ownership and management, A's, San Francisco police, all the entities that were involved in just presenting this wonderful opportunity in the Bay Area got together very quickly and started to pull in all the information that was coming out of the quake. And you remember the famous line, "Oh my God, the Bay Bridge has collapsed." And if you think about that, it's Armageddon, everybody's dead. Well, a plate of the bridge, fell down. And so once that information started to become known to everybody from reality to perception, we were able to proceed and, waited 10 days, but kept the World Series going. And I have a World Series ring because we swept the damn
You,
Giants.
you swept them after that, yeah. I am so appreciative of that story and that moment, and it was a moment where your teams all aligned, like with a sense of urgency and a sense of duty, and put the cities, the Bay Area, back on your shoulders and got it together on that one.
We
A
had players
remarkable story.
working, delivering food and clothing. There was that. I have a hanging in my wall, hundreds dead in huge quake, an original seismograph from the game and my tickets for the game. But 62 people died, and the Cypress structure on the Oakland side collapsed. That's where it was. There was a fire in San Francisco, but it was that ability to communicate. We met in the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco in candlelight for 5 days because they lost all their power. And we met every day for as long as we needed to make these decisions.
Is there somebody you put a finger on, having kind of managed that leadership well out of that crisis? It's a unique one, well worth talking about. But was there a
There
police leader,
were, yeah,
political leader who just stepped forward?
there were two people. One was the late Commissioner Fay Vincent, who basically showed, and he was more of a low key personality as a commissioner, but had, a fully functioning brain, better than most computers. And the other was a San Francisco highway patrolman, California highway patrolman, who drove his car onto the field because the electrical system at Candlestick, they didn't have a backup, and it was done. And they used the speakers on his car to basically inform the fans as to how to leave the stadium and be organized. And those two people showed me what true instant leadership is all about.
I love that, Jeremy. I want to come to you for a second. You're an expert on crisis recovery, and let's say you got the engagement tomorrow from USA Hockey to say, how do we begin to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, assess the damage we've done, the challenge, how do we get the women's team back feeling in a positive way, continue to move forward with a national governing body that handles athletes of both genders at all levels, from skating Twinkies on up to adulthood and to the NHL. And how do we begin to put that together and show that every athlete matters? What would be the steps you'd recommend in that way? And once I finish with that, I want to get a quick word on Milan as an Olympic experience from each of you. But go ahead, Jeremy. Give me a little bit on the crisis recovery. What's entailed?
So the big thing is this courage. I mean, so USA Hockey and the US OPC and the IOC didn't have courage to stop what happened. They didn't have courage to identify that this could have been an issue before the Olympics. And I'm sure the IOC security was trying their best, and I'm sure they were getting pushed out of the way at certain points. Like I didn't see it on TV. I'm just assuming based off of my other past experiences and seeing as a third party other situations, the IOC security was probably just getting pushed to the side, and there was probably some Italian man or woman who was like, "Ooh, I don't know what's happening
So,
here.
so
These people are
let's
pushing their way
focus
through. Let
on
me just let
today.
them through."
If
Yeah,
you're the
no,
head
no,
of
no,
USA Hockey,
and
what should
that's
you
where I'm
do
going.
today? Yeah.
Yeah, and so it comes down to courage, and the courage for today is realizing that you made a mistake or you made a series of mistakes, and how do we self-reflect, and then how do we move forward? Flavor Flav is doing a great job right now.
He
He
is.
saw the writing on the wall, and he immediately said, "Oh, by the way, the women are going to get, um, their recognition that they receive. I'm going to put something together." He also did this in the last Olympics with the U.S. women's water polo team. He has now done it with the U.S. women's hockey team and USA bobsled and skeleton. So he's out there doing what needs to be done. He's not officially in a leadership role in any of those organizations, or especially with the U.S. women's hockey team or U.S. hockey in general. But he has taken on that leadership role, and he has stepped in and saying, "I'm going to do this." But going back to your very specific question, Bob, is they have to have the courage to self reflect. They have to have the courage to be transparent. They have to have the courage to say, this is how we're going to move forward. And this is the reason why, because it's based off of what needs to be done, because it's the right thing to do, not because it needs to be done because we're now in a bad spot. And until they have the courage to make those realizations, um, there's going to be no true recovery for the entire organization. It's going to be a recovery to save themselves.
Doug, what would you implement?
Oh, there. I've during the last couple of days, as you know, Bob, I've written extensively about this in a variety of places where I write, and no one ever went broke by telling a man that it's not his fault. You know, no one ever has been chastised for allowing men to stand up and say, "Well, it's not my fault," and a thorough. It should have come much earlier, but a thorough examination and declaration of acknowledgement of what went wrong and remorse, okay, over the fact that it happened, owning it is the first major step that will lead to um, mitigating the negative and turning it into a positive. But we don't have either the institutional or the personal capacity to come to grips with something like that. I mean, we see it all the time with the Epstein stuff that's coming out. This dribble drabble of, well, the girl was above age, or it's no one sits back and says we are a forgiving nation, we are a forgiving culture, but the requirement to get that degree of forgiveness and to move forward requires some degree of transparency and remorse. So, what I would recommend to those who are in power or think they're in power to do is to um, um, come up with a thorough message of acknowledgement that this was a horrendous look to the end of something that should have looked really good, and an expression of remorse and apology. And if that doesn't happen, then the rest of it is just lipstick.
That's a great point. I'm gonna get to Andy and pull him in a second on this. I want to ask you just a quick question. We've seen the Olympic movement in a way sort of saved, it felt like, by Paris. going back to 2 summers ago, that they were in some quandary, in some doubt. The Paris games were joyous. They seemed to create a great acknowledgement. Where would you rate the Milan games? What good comes of it? What bad comes of it? What's still open in your mind?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, Doug, I'll come back to you on that one.
Yeah, I think they were from a competitive standpoint. I think that they were everything that you could ask out of an Olympics. There were some outstanding performances. There was drama. There were storylines. Every day there was a storyline. You know, starting with the misadventures of and the courageous attempt of Lindsey Voss to overcome an injury. So, from a competitive standpoint, I think that it gave the world everything that it's looking for. The facility seemed a bit stretched out. There didn't seem to be a nexus or a cohesion to it because of the way that it was geographically spread out. I don't think the production of either the opening or the closing ceremonies was particularly memorable, but I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that kind of stuff. So I'd give it a solid B minus.
Andy, I want to come to you with the idea of the idea of the courage argument and the remorse argument, because you were talking before, as we were getting our little warm up in early on, going, Doug and I have made some mistakes in our lives, and we'll both admit to them. Andy, in this moment, how do you admit a mistake? How does a leader come forward and go, I think admitting mistakes prevents future crisis, but can you connect that dot for me?
That one is a bit more difficult in the world of global media connectivity, and everybody is their own media outlet. So even though a leader of a team, a leader of an association, or an Olympic leader could say, "This is on me. This was my fault. I did this." Well, what is the pushback going to be from the other side? The Patel media forces, the president, a whole country. How dare you? We have the right to do whatever we want, whenever we want to do it. I mean, we fight through it every day. And so that one is much more complex today because everyone has an opinion and everyone has an ability through this kind of thing here to let the world know what is right and wrong. And I would just end it that every sports fan is an absolute genius. They know everything from A to Z in their organization. I welcome that because I like the openness of it. But first and foremost, as Doug said, and Jeremy was talking about, you have to take responsibility. In this case, because media stories are breaking news every 32 nanoseconds, I might leave this alone because we already have a controversy that is building in force for the LA Olympics in 2028 that revolves around one last name. So
Yep.
I want Lynch and the teams and the women to be the names that people remember, not Cash Patel or Casey Wasserman in 2028.
I give you the same second to give Milana and any final judgments
Oh,
on Milan
I
before
I
we move
just
on to
think
LA.
as a traveler who likes to zoom around whenever he or she can, uh, I just thought they presented the environment in a very positive mode. Like I want to go there, and I
Yep.
think ultimately that's a positive part of the Olympics. Not I'm going there to do a 1260 recumbent reverse whatever on Mogul Hill. No.
I, that's exactly right in my mind too. It's the idea that I want to visit there afterwards. You want to capture some of that, as Barcelona says, the Barcelona effect.
Right. And
Everybody would want to go
having a
to it.
great spokesman like Mike Tirico, who to me is, a Hall of Fame all-star and being able to bring out that quality, joy, experience, and competition is also another positive.
Jeremy, I want to give you a last word on Milan. Any lessons from it, kind of quickly before I
Well,
switch topics and move on to LA?
there's plenty of lessons. First one is the host nation did a fabulous job of putting together all the venues and everything else. Because I remember a year ago, and I even remember 6 months ago, talking to national governing bodies and national sports organizations about there potentially being some of the events at other locations outside of northern Italy, and the host nation did a great job making all of those good backup plans, but make sure that all the venues were good to go for this Olympics. The next thing I would like to bring up is we still, not only as a nation in the United States, but in the world, we're still not grasping the impact of women in the Olympics or in sports in general. Every single Olympics for the last 10 years. So we've had what? Three Winter Olympics, three Summer Olympics. We have had more women not only win medals but gold medals than men in the U.S. and we are not celebrating that. We are not appreciating that. You know, they're doing their part, but everyone was trying to break it in the locker room for the men's hockey team at the end, but not the women's hockey team who won by the same score in the same, not the same scenario, but they won in overtime 2-1 against the same competitor that the men did. But you know, those in important positions in the U.S. weren't trying to break into the locker room to be in that celebration like they were with the men. And so there's a huge disparity with women's sports. It's a very unfortunate, and I think that we need to continue to learn from that and to continue to praise women and girls with sports.
I want to shift gears, and it always comes out that there's an hour is never enough time with this group. And I'd say that just to anybody who's listening, and this will live in YouTube for forever, is that there's never enough time with Doug Logan in any context, and I can't get him on videotape or digital enough in the time I've got him. But Doug, you've led an Olympic movement sport. Andy's alluded to it. We've all kind of given a grade to Milan and where the Olympics are. The Olympics have geopolitical force, maybe more so now than at any time in U.S. history, other than the Cold War, perhaps, and particularly because of changes in the U.S. government and our use of policy and sport and statecraft and the combination thereof, which we've plumbed a little bit going back. LA has the LA Olympics in 1984 under Peter Ueberroth in many ways really did save the Olympics after Mexico City, Munich, Montreal, and Moscow, the M Games all put some pall over it. LA has now found themselves games that should pretty much come off because they don't have to really build too much. Has now got some shadow over it, and it comes around the treatment of women and whether Casey Wasserman's continuation in the Olympics as in the role as head of the organizing committee is going to persist. And he initially looks like he got a vote from his membership or his board that's going to keep him there. He's going to end up selling his company. This feels like a lot of black swan here because nobody plans. I'm gonna be in the Wasser. I'm gonna be on the Epstein list. But it's spilled into sports and it's spilled into the next big event in the Olympics. And you've headed Olympic sport. Give me your thoughts right now on what LA should be doing, what the USOPC should be doing in this moment, and to bring stakeholders to bear.
I'll add one additional player to that. What's the IOC doing about it? Because it's going to, if we continue going the way we're going to wind up with the overarching story to a multi-billion-dollar event that has altruism at its heart, and it's going to be seen in from a moral lens as a sullied event, and unless they find a way, these local host committees are and Andy's had some experience with this. Local host committees are a force into themselves. I mean, yeah, he got a unanimous affirmative vote from a committee that he put together, and they're they are beholden to no one else except them. And for right now, they have the contracts, they have the money that is needed to execute a very expensive few weeks in summer of 2028. I do think that there are prudent forces out there. I keep on hearing some names proposed to replace him, like Bob Iger, that really makes some sense. But I think Casey Wasserman has got to go. Otherwise, um, the drip, drip, drip of Epstein that is going to continue, I think, for the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to continue to contaminate what otherwise should be what Andy has correctly identified as the next or one of the next really joyful experiences that we can have as a culture.
And when we think about it, we have something coming up in June. I mean,
Yeah,
the World Cup in three countries, Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And let's think, we don't have time to get into it now, but the geopolitical effects of that and countries saying, no, I'm not coming. I have a game in the United States. I'm playing 6 games in Santa Clara. No, I'm not coming based upon what our political circumstances are at that time.
it's not only that, but Johnny Infantino, has gone ahead and shit in his own nest and created a situation where this is going to be known as the Trump Peace Prize World Cup rather than anything else.
Yeah, and we have no way of really effectively, other than us getting together and coming up with it in the next 7.5 minutes, how we get past this, the Olympics in 2028, the geopolitical influence, what's happening in a country, what's happening with people. Jeremy talked about the incredible growth every day in every way of girls and women in sports, which is welcome as the parent of identical twin daughters who played sports through college. We need to think about all of those effects, but the challenge which we started with is who sits in that room, who makes decisions, how deep do they go, what kind of influence do they have, and just to change the tenor for 1 second, and I'll be quiet. I'm curious whether Kash Patel took or was given those little furry Olympic mascots that the Canadian hockey players looked like they wanted to throw in the face of the people that were presenting them. So if Kash Patel took any of those, he needs to give those back right away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think all. I'm going to put a little punctuation mark on what Andy said. All too often, we think of sports as being one of these frivolous enterprises. It's peripheral. Um, More and more, it has become a part of the smorgasbord table of culture, and people who in responsible positions have got to recognize that they can't just look at sports through a commercial lens. They also have to look at it through a legal or illegal lens, an ethical or unethical lens, or an immoral and an immoral lens. And it's become a collecting place for people with some character flaws, some unsavory characters. We're allowing them to carry the day. And there's not enough people who are standing up and saying, No, not in my sport. No, not on my team. No, not in my league. No, not in my event. And that is what I see as a flaw, that the people unwilling to stand up and have the courage to say no.
I think there's an easy moment here. I'm hoping it comes, and I'm hoping it comes from Roger Goodell. at least around ending some of the Epstein issues. And you've used the phrase a lot, Doug, about going to get the sheriff, hiring a sheriff, bringing a sheriff in, trying to clean things up. And I feel like I ended up in one of those sheriff roles because Andy Dolish gave some advice one time about running into a crisis, and I became a sheriff and followed his advice. Uh, and still think it's a great thing that I did. I kind of knew it wasn't going to be something I would enjoy in the moment, but something that was going to be good for all of us at the end of the day. Roger came into his commissionership wanting to be a sheriff to clean up player conduct. He's got an Epstein challenge around an owner, but an owner who's at least somewhat peripheral to his biggest franchise, and he has opportunities here maybe to make a positive change. Any thoughts on will it be a Goodell? Who will take that first step? I
Well,
don't know why I'm theorizing it's Roger.
it's got to be a series. Roger has an opportunity, and by the way, would be well advised to go ahead and take it and make sure that that a certain member of the Tisch family no longer has his hands anywhere near that team. But but others have that same opportunity too. There's a legacy of it. Kennesaw Mountain Land is in baseball. The Olympic movement. John McCain was a sheriff post Salt Lake City. There are other people who have had the power and the gumption to stand up and say no more,
Right.
and no one is standing up and saying no more anymore. All they're doing is giving another peace prize out. So
And as crazy as this sounds, I'm not taking a position on what Roger should do, but Roger Goodell is an employee.
yeah,
He's an employee of, I don't know what the total number is, but of owners that are worth collectively hundreds of billions, maybe trillions, somebody else's favorite word, trillions of dollars, and they can make determinations. And you don't like to screw around with your fellow club members that often to show your spine. That's another dynamic for another session in terms of ownership decisions in the multiple leagues that Doug and I have worked with.
It fascinatingly is. I liken all of European history and the crowned heads of Europe to how commissioners and leagues run. You might not like Charles the First, but you don't like him when you behead him. You worry all of us. So
yeah.
I think of it that way. Andy, to your question, is this a place where a commissioner is justified to step in?
I think so, because it is the good of the
Oh, they're
game.
good.
It is a difficult decision, which is the job of commissioners. And it, in terms of circumstance, can shut off the spigot, which isn't going to be shut off vis-a-vis Epstein and other people of influence for God knows how long.
So we are down to about 6 minutes, and we've covered a grand total of two topics. We had about nine.
That's a
This is not
crisis
a
in and of
this is
itself.
no,
Right?
this is not a crisis. It just means we have to come back in about 6 weeks and talk about it again. We're exactly where we expected to be at this point. We want to thank our audience for kind of listening in. If there's somebody who wants to get in with a question, we may have just a chance to take it. And Jeremy, I'm sorry I haven't come back to you, but I wanted to get to Doug and Andy as much as I could. I'm particularly finding the Tish situation an interesting one because I obviously spent the longest sustained career in my time working at the Preston Robert Tisch Center for Hospitality, Tourism, and Sports Management at NYU, 15 years, and it's the association that brought me to Doug and ultimately launched me to get to know you, Andy. Uh, and I think the world of the Tisch family in a variety of ways. Uh, more of Jonathan, who was our main person in working with it. But I think there's actually even a better answer that this is one of those easy ones, a low-hanging fruit. The sister of Jonathan and Steve, Lori, is an extraordinary human. Has been involved in the team. She may not be directly involved, but her daughter, Carolyn Blodgett Tisch, is one of the leaders of the National Women's Soccer League, one of their directors. She's a Yale and a Harvard grad, I think, in her early 30s and has already played a role in sports. She'd be a really easy next gen pick for the Tisch family to lead the Giants into the future as they go. And if I were Roger Goodell, I think I already would have made that call. But We'll take that moment of privilege. Uh, Doug, you came up with an idea, and we were talking about panelists and people who could join this conversation. You were very firm that it should be three white guys who have AARP cards in this conversation, or old enough to have AARP cards, and we drag Jeremy along because he does crisis recovery. Uh, why did you choose that? We're not a diverse panel. There was a reason why you picked it and said that four white guys could handle this one, and maybe it was right we did. Why?
Because ultimately, the first reason is that this is a crisis created by men to perpetuate male dominance in a sport. It is the ultimate the ultimate reason why it's become so controversial is that it is again another instance of males dominating females, treating them as a secondary form of life, and that it is a conversation that ought to be led now by males and not and the responsibility not put off to female. The second reason is an important one because I've seen this dynamic take place. If we were to have a diverse panel of men and women, the natural tendency of offense and defense and competitiveness between the genders gets in the way of total openness. And I think that the dynamic would have been different had we addressed, for example, the hockey issue. The hockey issue is one that has been, the problem was created by men. It the bad look was done by men, and it should be men who own up to it and say this is wrong. And it should not be put on someone else to come in and clean this mess up.
Andy, I'm going to give you a quick response to that, if you don't mind.
Uh, well, we live in an age of the Tower of Babel, that everybody has an influence. And Doug is being very specific on this issue, which I would agree with. I also think there's an opportunity here for an upcoming panel on the growth, the incredible growth every day in every way of women in sports. I was lucky enough, I do some babbling at Stanford School of Continuing Studies, and I'm taking a class from Tara Vanderveer, one of the greatest basketball coaches of all
I
time.
had a side remark. Is that a good school, Andy?
No, no, it's not Samford. It ends with a D. Anyway, um, the guests in her class last Tuesday were the African American general manager of the Valkyries, the white president woman, and the woman was African American, and the coach woman also who is Asian. And it was an unbelievably uplifting session. The Valkyries are one of the great stories in sports in terms of what they've done. So I think an upcoming session would be, women talking about the issues of sports, and diversity. That's what I would look for.
It's a weird time to do a shout out to people who've listened through this session, but two of the leading figures in crisis recovery in women's issues, and particularly around sports, but also in the workplace, are listening right now, and I'll love to hear from them offline when we get together again. Gentlemen, it's been an incredible pleasure to spend the last hour with you. Jeremy, we're almost out of time. Can I give you the last word as an unusual statement? And thank you. I think the only thought every time I get together with Doug and anyone else is that can we do it again? And I'm sure we will, and Jeremy will let us. But Thank you for all the thoughts and all the ideas today. And I do agree with you that we, as particularly as men, bear some burden for standing up in this moment too. Jeremy, go ahead and take us out.
I just want to leave us with this is with this prior Olympics that we just finished and future Olympics, do we want it to be remembered for one or several people that had nothing to do with sports or who were not athletes, or do we want to remember that it was actually the Olympic Games and it was incredible competition and there were great athletes all around? Which do we want to remember? And I think that's what people need to think about moving forward to the next Olympics. Do we want the next Olympics to be about washermen, or do we want the Olympics to be about the Olympians?